Before we begin, I want you to ask yourself one question. When was the last time you chose yourself without feeling guilty? Not when was the last time you helped someone. Not when was the last time you sacrificed for someone. Not when was the last time you made someone else happy. When was the last time you truly chose yourself? For many people, the answer is painful because they have spent years putting everyone else first, years carrying other people's problems, years protecting other people's feelings, years trying not to disappoint anyone, years saying yes when they wanted to say no, years giving love, attention, energy, and understanding to everyone around them. And somewhere along the way, they disappeared. The tragedy is that most people do not lose themselves in a single moment. They lose themselves slowly, one sacrifice at a time, one apology at a time, one ignored feeling at a time, until one day they wake up feeling exhausted, unappreciated, and strangely disconnected from their own life. But what if the real reason you keep choosing others over yourself has nothing to do with kindness? What if it is something much deeper, something hidden beneath your habits, your relationships, and even your identity? In this video, we will uncover one of the most powerful truths in Buddhist wisdom, a truth that explains why so many people abandon themselves for others, why it creates so much suffering, and how you can finally stop losing yourself while trying to be loved. Because the greatest loss is not losing another person. The greatest loss is losing yourself. And the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment your true life begins. You were trained to disappear and call it love. Many people do not abandon themselves in one big dramatic moment. They abandon themselves slowly, quietly, again and again. It happens in small moments that look normal from the outside, but slowly break something inside. You say yes when your whole body wants to say no. You stay silent when someone's words hurt you. You laugh when you actually feel disrespected. You say it's okay when deep inside it is not okay at all. You answer messages when you are tired. You keep explaining yourself to people who are not trying to understand you. You show up for others when your own heart is begging you to rest. You forgive too quickly, not because you are healed, but because you are afraid of losing the relationship. You keep giving people access to you, even when their presence leaves you feeling heavy. And because these moments seem small, you do not always recognize them as self-abandonment. You call it kindness. You call it patience. You call it maturity. You call it being a good person. You call it keeping peace. You call it understanding others. But deep inside, something starts to hurt. Something inside you begins to feel unseen. Something inside you begins to whisper, "What about me?" Because every time you deny your own truth just to keep someone close, a part of you learns a painful lesson. It learns that love means disappearing. It learns that connection means silence. It learns that being accepted means hiding your real feelings. It learns that keeping people happy is more important than keeping your own soul peaceful. And slowly, you begin to live as if your needs are a problem. You begin to feel guilty for being tired. You begin to feel selfish for wanting space. You begin to feel afraid of saying no. You begin to feel uncomfortable when someone asks, "What do you want?" Because for so long, you have been trained to ask, "What do they want from me?" This is why self-abandonment can feel normal. It does not always feel like a wound at first. Sometimes it feels like love. Sometimes it feels like loyalty. Sometimes it feels like responsibility. Sometimes it feels like being strong. But not everything that looks like strength is strength. Sometimes it is fear wearing the mask of strength. Sometimes it is pain pretending to be patience. Sometimes it is self-betrayal dressed as kindness. Maybe this began early in your life. Maybe you were praised when you were easy to handle. Maybe people liked you more when you did not complain. Maybe you received affection when you were quiet, useful, and agreeable. Maybe you learned that if you had too many needs, people became irritated. But when you helped them, pleased them, or stayed silent, they became warm again. So your mind began to create a hidden rule. If I want love, I must not be difficult. If I want peace, I must not speak too much. If I want people to stay, I must not disappoint them. If I want to be accepted, I must become what they need. If I want to be valued, I must be useful. And because this rule helped you survive emotionally, you kept following it, even when it hurt, even when it drained you, even when it made you feel lonely around people, even when you were surrounded by others, but still felt unknown. Because the truth is, when you always become what others need, they may love the version of you that serves them, but they may never meet the real you. They may know your help, but not your heart. They may know your patience, but not your pain. They may know your smile, but not your silence. They may know how much you can give, but not how much you have been carrying. And this is why choosing others over yourself can become so painful. You are loved for your availability, but not always understood in your exhaustion. You are appreciated for your kindness, but not always protected in your weakness. You are called strong, but not always asked if you are okay. And after a while, you begin to wonder why you feel empty. You begin to wonder why relationships feel heavy. You begin to wonder why you feel unseen, even by people you keep showing up for. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins when we do not see clearly. We suffer when we cling to false ideas. We suffer when we believe we must earn love by losing ourselves. We suffer when we attach our worth to being approved, needed, or accepted. But the path of awakening begins with seeing the truth without running away from it, not blaming yourself, not hating your past, not attacking the people who shaped your patterns, just seeing clearly, seeing that you were trained to confuse self-betrayal with love, seeing that you were rewarded for being silent, seeing that you were praised for being easy, seeing that your exhaustion is not proof that you are loving enough. It is proof that you have been ignoring yourself for too long. Real love does not ask you to erase yourself. Real compassion does not ask you to suffer quietly. Real connection does not require you to become smaller so someone else can feel comfortable. Real kindness does not mean saying yes while your soul is saying no. Real peace does not mean everyone else is comfortable while you are breaking inside. This is why awareness is so powerful. The moment you notice the pattern, you are no longer completely trapped by it. The moment you can say, I am abandoning myself right now, you have already taken the first step back home. You do not have to change everything overnight. You do not have to become harsh. You do not have to stop loving people. You simply begin by pausing. Before you say yes, pause. Before you apologize for having feelings, pause. Before you explain yourself to someone who never listens, pause. Before you give your energy away again, pause. Ask yourself gently, am I doing this from love or from fear? Ask yourself, am I choosing this because it feels right or because I am afraid they will leave? Ask yourself, am I being kind to them while being cruel to myself? These simple questions can begin to wake you up, because what was learned can be unlearned. What was practiced can be released. What was once survival does not have to become your whole life. You can love people without disappearing. You can care without becoming empty. You can be gentle without becoming available for everything. You can be compassionate without betraying your own peace. And the day you understand this, something inside you begins to return. Your voice returns. Your peace returns. Your self-respect returns. Your breath returns. You stop seeing your needs as a burden. You stop seeing your boundaries as cruelty. You stop seeing your truth as something dangerous. And slowly, you begin to realize that the real path is not becoming harder. The real path is becoming honest. Honest enough to admit when something hurts. Honest enough to admit when you are tired. Honest enough to admit when love has turned into self-abandonment. Honest enough to come back to yourself before you disappear completely. This is the beginning of freedom, not the freedom of leaving everyone, but the freedom of no longer leaving yourself. Their approval feels like safety, but it is stealing your freedom. One of the deepest reasons you keep choosing others over yourself is because their approval feels like safety. When they are happy with you, you feel calm. When they smile at you, you feel accepted. When they answer warmly, you feel wanted. When they say, "You are so kind," or "You always understand me," Something inside you feels relieved. It feels like you are finally enough. It feels like you are finally safe. It feels like you are not going to be rejected. But when their mood changes, your whole inner world begins to shake. When they become quiet, you start thinking too much. When they seem distant, you begin blaming yourself. When they reply coldly, you wonder what you did wrong. When they look disappointed, you feel the need to fix everything quickly. And without realizing it, their emotions become your master. Their approval becomes your shelter. Their silence becomes your punishment. Their mood becomes your weather. Their opinion becomes your mirror. This is how you slowly lose your freedom. Not because someone has locked you in a room, but because you have placed the key to your peace in someone else's hands. You may still walk freely. You may still smile. You may still appear strong, but inside, you are always watching, always measuring, always adjusting, always asking yourself, are they okay with me? And when a person lives like this for too long, they stop living from truth. They start living from fear. You stop asking, what do I honestly feel? You start asking, what will keep them happy? You stop asking, is this right for me? You start asking, will they be upset if I choose this? You stop asking, do I have peace here? You start asking, will they still like me if I speak honestly? And slowly, your life becomes a performance. You perform calmness when you are hurt. You perform patience when you are exhausted. You perform understanding when you feel unseen. You perform kindness when deep inside you are full of resentment. You perform strength when you are silently breaking. This is not peace. This is fear wearing the mask of goodness. This is not love. This is attachment to approval. Buddhism teaches that suffering often begins when we cling to what is unstable, and approval is one of the most unstable things in the world. Today someone praises you. Tomorrow they may misunderstand you. Today someone needs you. Tomorrow they may forget how much you gave. Today someone calls you important. Tomorrow they may become distant when you stop doing what benefits them. If your peace depends on their approval, your peace will never be steady, because people change, their needs change, their feelings change, their expectations change, their level of awareness changes. And if you keep building your identity on their changing emotions, you will always feel uncertain inside. You will always feel like you must earn your place. You will always feel like one wrong word, one boundary, one honest sentence, or one moment of choosing yourself could make you lose love. This is why approval can become addictive. It gives you a short moment of relief, but it never gives you real freedom. When they approve of you, you feel high for a moment. When they pull away, you crash. Then you start chasing the approval again. You give more. You explain more. You become softer. You become quieter. You forgive faster. You ignore more. You bend yourself again, just to feel safe again. But this cycle does not heal you. It trains you to abandon yourself. It teaches your mind that peace comes from pleasing others. It teaches your heart that love must be earned by becoming acceptable. It teaches your soul that your truth is dangerous if it makes someone uncomfortable. And this is the trap. You begin to think you are protecting the relationship, but you are actually losing yourself inside it. You begin to think you are keeping love alive, but you are feeding fear. You begin to think you are being loyal, but you are becoming disloyal to your own spirit. Real freedom begins when you can let someone be disappointed without immediately betraying yourself. This does not mean you become rude. It does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you ignore people's feelings. It means you stop making yourself responsible for every feeling they have. You can care about someone without carrying their emotional reactions as your burden. You can love someone without becoming afraid of their disappointment. You can respect someone without obeying every expectation they place on you. You can listen with compassion without giving up your own truth. This is the middle path. Not selfishness, not self-erasure, but balance. The middle path says, your feelings matter, but my peace matters too. It says, I can understand you, but I will not disappear for you. It says, I can be kind, but I will not be controlled by guilt. It says, I can love you, but I will not lose myself to keep you close. This is where real strength begins. because anyone can be kind when there is no fear. But true awakening is when you remain kind even while choosing yourself. True awareness is when you can feel guilt rising, but not let it control your decision. True freedom is when you can notice someone's disappointment, breathe through the discomfort, and still stay loyal to your own truth. For many people, this feels very difficult at first, because the body remembers old fear, the mind remembers old rejection, the heart remembers the times when love felt conditional. So when you start choosing yourself, your old patterns may scream. They may say, you are being selfish. They may say, they will leave. They may say, you are going to lose everyone. They may say, just say yes, just apologize, just keep the peace. But pause, breathe, look deeper. Ask yourself, is this fear telling the truth, or is it repeating an old wound? Because sometimes the voice telling you to abandon yourself is not wisdom. It is old pain. It is the child inside you who learned that pleasing people was safer than being honest. It is the wounded part of you that believes love disappears when you have boundaries. It is the old version of you that thinks rejection is the worst thing that can happen. But rejection is not always the worst thing. Sometimes losing yourself is worse. Sometimes staying in false acceptance is worse. Sometimes being loved for a version of you that is not real is more painful than being disliked for finally being honest. Because when people only love the version of you that has no needs, no limits, no voice, and no boundaries, they are not loving your whole self. They are loving your usefulness. They are loving your silence. They are loving your fear. They are loving the part of you that makes their life easier. And your awakening begins when you stop calling that love. Real love can meet your truth. Real love can respect your limits. Real love may feel uncomfortable sometimes, but it does not require your self-destruction. Real love does not demand that you become empty so someone else can feel full. This is why you must gently take your peace back, not by fighting, not by proving, not by becoming harsh, but by returning to your center. Before you answer, breathe. Before you agree, breathe. Before you apologize, breathe. Before you rush to fix someone's mood, breathe. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it is right, or because I am afraid? Ask yourself, am I choosing from love, or am I choosing from panic? Ask yourself, if they were not disappointed, what would I truly want? These questions bring you back to awareness, and awareness is where freedom begins. The more you practice this, the more you will realize something powerful. You can survive someone's disappointment. You can survive someone not understanding you. You can survive someone being upset because you finally chose peace. You can survive not being liked by everyone. But you cannot keep surviving a life where you abandon yourself every day. That kind of survival slowly becomes suffering. So stop making approval your home. Approval is too unstable to live inside. Build your home in awareness. Build your home in self-respect. Build your home in truth. Build your home in the quiet place within you that does not need everyone to clap before it knows it is worthy. Because when you stop chasing approval, something beautiful happens. You begin to feel peaceful even when others do not fully understand you. You begin to speak honestly without shaking as much. You begin to say no without drowning in guilt. You begin to let people have their reactions without making those reactions your responsibility. You begin to understand that another person's discomfort is not always a sign that you did something wrong. Sometimes it is a sign that you stopped betraying yourself. Sometimes it is a sign that you are growing. Sometimes it is a sign that the old version of you is ending, and that ending is not a loss, it is liberation. The person who needs everyone's approval can never be free, but the person who can stand calmly in their own truth has already begun to awaken. So choose peace over applause. Choose truth over performance. Choose self-respect over temporary acceptance. Let people think what they think. Let people feel what they feel. Let people misunderstand what they are not ready to understand. Your path is not to become perfect in their eyes. Your path is to become honest in your own heart. And the moment you stop needing their approval to feel safe, you begin to discover a deeper safety. A safety that comes from presence, a safety that comes from awareness, a safety that comes from knowing, even if they do not choose me, I will not abandon myself. That is real freedom. That is real healing. That is the beginning of living from your own soul again. The fear of seeming selfish is keeping you a prisoner. One of the biggest reasons people keep abandoning themselves is not because they do not know what they need. Deep down, they often know exactly what they need. They know they need rest. They know they need space. They know they need stronger boundaries. They know they need to stop overgiving. They know they need to stop chasing people who do not value them. They know they need to speak honestly. They know they need to protect their peace. The problem is not lack of awareness. The problem is fear. The fear of being called selfish. The fear of disappointing someone. The fear of being misunderstood. The fear of being judged. The fear of looking like the bad person. And because this fear feels so uncomfortable, many people continue betraying themselves rather than facing it. Think about how many times you have ignored your own needs simply because you did not want someone else to be upset. How many times have you said yes when your heart was screaming no? How many times have you agreed to something that exhausted you because you did not want to seem rude? How many times have you answered messages when you desperately needed silence? How many times have you carried emotional weight that never belonged to you? How many times have you apologized for things that were not your fault? How many times have you chosen guilt over peace? And perhaps the saddest question of all, how many times have you abandoned yourself and called it kindness? This is where many people become trapped. They confuse self-respect with selfishness. They confuse boundaries with rejection. They confuse self-care with arrogance. They confuse honesty with cruelty. And because of this confusion, they spend years living a life that slowly drains them. A life where everyone receives their energy except themselves. A life where everyone receives their understanding except themselves. A life where everyone receives compassion except the person who needs it most, themselves. Buddhism teaches us to observe suffering honestly, not to run from it, not to cover it with positive thinking, not to pretend everything is fine, but to look directly at the source. And when you look deeply enough, you may discover something surprising. Many of your sacrifices were never truly about love. Many of them were about fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of being disliked, fear of being abandoned, fear of standing alone, fear of disappointing people. And fear is a terrible guide for a meaningful life, because fear will always tell you to shrink. Fear will always tell you to stay silent. Fear will always tell you to keep sacrificing your truth. Fear will always tell you that your needs are dangerous. Fear will always convince you that everyone else's comfort matters more than your own well-being. But fear never leads to freedom. Fear only creates smaller and smaller versions of yourself. Over time, something painful begins to happen. You become a stranger to your own life. You become so focused on what everyone else needs that you stop asking yourself what you need. You become so concerned about everyone else's feelings that you stop noticing your own. You become so committed to keeping everyone comfortable that you forget what comfort feels like, and slowly your soul begins to feel exhausted. Not because you are weak, but because no human being was designed to carry everyone else's needs while ignoring their own. Even the strongest heart eventually becomes tired. Even the kindest person eventually becomes depleted. Even the most compassionate soul eventually begins to suffer when compassion never flows inward. The Buddha taught the middle way, not extreme selfishness, not extreme self-sacrifice. Balance, wisdom, awareness, a life where compassion includes everyone, including yourself. This is what many people miss. They think the only choices are selfishness or self-sacrifice. But there is a third path, a healthier path, a wiser path, a path where you care about others without abandoning yourself, a path where you love deeply without losing your identity, a path where you remain compassionate without becoming emotionally exhausted, a path where your kindness comes from abundance instead of depletion. The truth is, Choosing yourself does not mean you stop caring about others. It means you stop treating yourself as if you matter less. Choosing yourself does not mean becoming cold. It means becoming honest. Choosing yourself does not mean abandoning people. It means refusing to abandon your own soul. There is a profound difference. Imagine a person drowning in water. If you jump in to save them without knowing how to swim, both of you may sink. This is how many people live emotionally. They keep jumping into other people's pain. They keep carrying other people's responsibilities. They keep absorbing other people's problems. And eventually, they lose themselves in the process. But wisdom says something different. Wisdom says you must first remain grounded. You must remain conscious. You must remain connected to yourself. Only then can your help truly be useful. Only then can your compassion be sustainable. Only then can your love remain pure. Because exhausted love eventually becomes resentment. Forced kindness eventually becomes bitterness. Endless sacrifice eventually becomes suffering, and suffering that is ignored eventually turns into emotional emptiness. This is why learning to choose yourself is not selfish. It is necessary, it is healthy, it is wise, it is an act of respect toward your own life. And perhaps one of the hardest parts of this journey is realizing that some people may not like the new version of you. The version that has boundaries, the version that says no, the version that protects their energy, the version that values their peace, the version that no longer apologizes for existing. Some people will call this selfish, not because it is selfish, but because they were comfortable with the version of you that never had limits. They were comfortable with the version of you that always gave more. They were comfortable with the version of you that always said yes. They were comfortable with the version of you that made their life easier. And when you begin changing, they may resist, not because your growth is wrong, but because your growth changes the relationship. This is why awakening requires courage. The courage to disappoint people when necessary, the courage to be misunderstood, the courage to choose peace over approval, the courage to trust yourself, the courage to honor your needs, the courage to stand alone when standing alone is healthier than betraying yourself. And make no mistake, this courage will transform your life. Because the moment you stop living to avoid criticism, you start living authentically. The moment you stop seeking permission to care for yourself, you begin healing. The moment you stop making your worth dependent on how useful you are to others, you begin discovering your true value. And that value has nothing to do with how much you give, nothing to do with how much you sacrifice, nothing to do with how many people approve of you. Your value exists because you exist. Your worth is not something you earn. It is something you remember. And once you remember it, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop feeling guilty for resting. You stop feeling guilty for saying no. You stop feeling guilty for protecting your energy. You stop feeling guilty for walking away from what harms you. You stop feeling guilty for choosing peace. You stop feeling guilty for choosing yourself, because you finally understand something most people spend their entire lives trying to learn. You were never meant to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. You were never meant to disappear so others could feel comfortable. You were never meant to spend your life proving that you deserve love. You were never meant to carry everyone while abandoning yourself. You were meant to live fully. You were meant to breathe freely. You were meant to love from wholeness, not exhaustion. You were meant to care without collapsing. You were meant to be compassionate without becoming empty. And the moment you stop fearing the word selfish, you create space for something far more powerful. Self-respect, self-trust, self-compassion, inner freedom, and from that freedom, a new life begins. A life where you no longer need to choose between kindness and yourself. A life where both can exist together. A life where love no longer requires your suffering. A life where peace no longer comes second. A life where, for the first time, you finally understand that taking care of yourself is not selfish. It is wisdom, it is healing, and it is one of the greatest acts of awakening you will ever experience. You became addicted to being needed. because it made you feel worthy. There is a hidden reason many people keep choosing others over themselves. It is not always kindness. It is not always love. It is not always compassion. Sometimes it is something much deeper. Sometimes it is the need to feel needed, and this need can become one of the strongest attachments a person carries without even realizing it. Think about it. How do you feel when someone comes to you for help? How do you feel when someone says, "I don't know what I would do without you"? How do you feel when people depend on you? How do you feel when someone needs your advice, your support, your presence, your time, or your emotional strength? For a moment it feels good, it feels meaningful, it feels important, it feels like your life has value, it feels like you matter. And there is nothing wrong with helping people. There is nothing wrong with supporting others. There is nothing wrong with being compassionate. But the problem begins when your sense of worth becomes attached to being needed. Because once that happens, helping is no longer just an act of kindness. It becomes a way to feel valuable. It becomes a way to feel secure. It becomes a way to feel loved. And without realizing it, you begin building your identity around other people's dependence on you. You become the helper, the fixer, the peacemaker, the listener, the rescuer, the one who always understands, the one who always gives another chance, the one who never says no, the one who is always available, the one who carries everyone else's emotional weight, the one who stays strong while silently breaking. And at first, people admire you for it. They tell you how dependable you are, how kind you are, how generous you are, how selfless you are. And each compliment reinforces the identity. Each compliment strengthens the attachment. Each compliment whispers the same message. You matter because people need you. Slowly, your worth becomes connected to your usefulness, and that is where suffering begins. Because what happens when people no longer need you? What happens when someone solves their own problems? What happens when someone leaves? What happens when someone stops calling? What happens when someone becomes independent? What happens when your role as the helper disappears? For many people, an uncomfortable emptiness appears, not because they lost a relationship, but because they lost the role that made them feel valuable. This is why some people keep attracting those who need saving. This is why some people stay in one-sided relationships. This is why some people continue giving long after they are exhausted. Because being needed has become emotionally addictive. The mind starts believing, if they need me, they won't leave me. If they depend on me, I matter. If I keep giving, I will be loved. If I solve their problems, I will be important. But love built on usefulness is fragile, because usefulness can always be replaced. The painful truth is that some people do not stay because they value your soul. They stay because they value what you provide. They stay because you listen. They stay because you rescue. They stay because you sacrifice. They stay because you make life easier. And when you stop giving, the relationship suddenly changes. This is one of the most heartbreaking awakenings a person can experience. You realize that some people loved your service more than they loved you. They loved your availability. They loved your patience. They loved your endless understanding. They loved your willingness to carry burdens that were never yours, but they never truly saw how much it cost you. They never saw the exhaustion. They never saw the loneliness. They never saw the nights when you felt empty after giving everything away. Because people often become comfortable receiving what should never have been expected. And when you finally stop overgiving, they may act disappointed. They may act confused. They may even accuse you of changing. But what they are really noticing is this: you are no longer abandoning yourself for their comfort. Buddhism teaches that attachment is one of the greatest sources of suffering. Most people think attachment only means attachment to people. But attachment can also be attachment to identities, attachment to roles, attachment to the image of being needed, attachment to being the strong one, attachment to being the savior, attachment to being the person everyone depends on. And when you become attached to these identities, you begin living for them. You stop asking what you need. You stop listening to your own exhaustion. You stop honoring your own limits. You stop noticing your own suffering. Because maintaining the identity becomes more important than protecting your peace. This is why some of the kindest people in the world are secretly the most exhausted. They have spent years taking care of everyone except themselves, years being available, years carrying emotional burdens, years fixing problems, years absorbing pain, years sacrificing their own needs, years believing their value comes from what they do rather than who they are. But true worth has nothing to do with usefulness. Read that again. True worth has nothing to do with usefulness. A flower does not earn its value by serving everyone. A mountain does not earn its value by solving people's problems. The moon does not earn its value by making everyone happy. Its value exists simply because it exists, and the same is true for you. Your worth is not something you earn through exhaustion. Your worth is not something you achieve through sacrifice. Your worth is not something that appears only when people need you. Your worth is already here. It always was. You were simply taught to look for it in the wrong places. You looked for it in approval. You looked for it in praise. You looked for it in gratitude. You looked for it in being useful. You looked for it in being needed. But none of those things can create true worth. They can only temporarily distract you from the worth that already exists within you. This is why awakening feels so strange at first, because awakening asks you to stop earning what was never missing. It asks you to stop proving what was already true. It asks you to stop chasing validation and start remembering your value. Imagine waking up one day and no longer needing to be needed. Imagine helping because you genuinely want to help, not because you are afraid of being forgotten. Imagine loving because love flows naturally from your heart, not because you are trying to secure your place in someone's life. Imagine giving without secretly hoping it will make people stay. Imagine caring without carrying. Imagine supporting without sacrificing yourself. Imagine being present without losing your identity. That is freedom. That is healthy compassion. That is what Buddhist wisdom points toward. A heart that loves without attachment. A heart that gives without self-destruction. A heart that remains open without becoming empty. Because the truth is, you do not need people to need you in order to matter. You do not need people to depend on you in order to be valuable. You do not need to rescue everyone to deserve love. You do not need to exhaust yourself to prove your worth. You do not need to carry the world to earn your place in it. Your existence is enough. Your breath is enough. Your presence is enough. Your life is enough. The moment you understand this, something begins to soften inside you. You stop chasing the role of the rescuer. You stop carrying responsibilities that belong to others. You stop making yourself responsible for everyone's happiness. You stop trying to save people who refuse to save themselves. You stop measuring your value by how much you sacrifice. And for the first time, you begin experiencing a different kind of peace. A peace that does not come from being needed. A peace that does not depend on praise. A peace that does not require constant giving. A peace that comes from knowing who you are beyond every role, beyond every expectation, beyond every identity, beyond every attachment. And when that peace arrives, you discover something beautiful. You can still love people. You can still help people. You can still be kind. You can still be compassionate, but now you do it from fullness instead of emptiness, from awareness instead of fear, from freedom instead of attachment. Because your worth no longer depends on being needed. Your worth simply exists, and that realization may be one of the most liberating truths you will ever discover. The moment you stop needing to be needed, you finally become free enough to love without losing yourself. And that is where true inner peace begins. You keep betraying yourself because you stopped trusting your inner voice. One of the greatest tragedies in life is not losing other people. It is losing connection with yourself. It is reaching a point where you can clearly hear everyone else's opinions, but you can no longer hear your own truth. It is becoming so focused on what others think, want, expect, and need, that your own inner voice becomes distant, faint, almost silent. Many people do not realize this has happened to them. They think they have a confidence problem. They think they are confused. They think they are overthinking. But often the real issue is much deeper. They have spent so many years ignoring themselves that they no longer trust what they feel. They no longer trust what their heart is trying to tell them. They no longer trust their own wisdom. Think about how many times your inner voice tried to protect you. It told you something felt wrong. It told you someone was draining your energy. It told you a situation was unhealthy. It told you a relationship was becoming one-sided. It told you that you were giving too much. It told you that you were tired. It told you that you needed rest. It told you that a boundary was necessary. It told you that you were losing yourself. But instead of listening, you ignored it, not because you were weak, not because you were foolish, but because you had been trained to trust everyone else's needs more than your own. So each time your inner voice spoke, another voice spoke louder. The voice of guilt, the voice of fear, the voice of people-pleasing, the voice that said, maybe I'm overreacting, maybe I'm being selfish, maybe I should just be more understanding, maybe I should try harder, maybe it's my fault. And little by little, your own wisdom became buried underneath years of self-doubt. This is how self-betrayal begins, not with one decision, but with thousands of moments where you choose to distrust yourself. Every time your body says no, and your mouth says yes. Every time your heart feels hurt, and you pretend everything is fine. Every time you feel exhausted, but force yourself to keep giving. Every time you sense something is wrong, but ignore the warning. Every time you abandon your truth to avoid discomfort, you teach yourself a painful lesson. You teach yourself that your voice cannot be trusted, and eventually, you stop listening altogether. The Buddha taught that awareness is the beginning of liberation, that awareness becomes impossible when you are disconnected from yourself. Because how can you awaken if you never listen? How can you find peace if you keep ignoring the place where peace begins? How can you discover truth if you keep silencing the one voice that knows it? Your inner voice is not loud. It rarely screams. It does not force. It does not demand attention. It whispers. And because it whispers, it is easy to miss, especially in a world full of noise, a world full of opinions, a world full of expectations, a world full of pressure, a world that constantly tells you who you should be instead of helping you discover who you are. The inner voice often speaks through feelings. It speaks through discomfort. It speaks through exhaustion. It speaks through heaviness. It speaks through tension in your body. It speaks through the sadness you cannot explain. It speaks through the anxiety that appears whenever you ignore your own needs. It speaks through the feeling that something is missing even when everything looks fine from the outside. Many people try to silence these signals. They distract themselves. They stay busy. They keep helping. They keep giving. They keep running, because stopping means feeling, and feeling means facing truths they have avoided for years. But healing begins the moment you stop running. Healing begins the moment you become willing to sit quietly and listen, not to the world, not to other people's opinions, not to social expectations, but to yourself, to the part of you that has been waiting patiently beneath all the noise, the part that knows when you are hurting, the part that knows when you are pretending, the part that knows when you are settling, the part that knows when you are abandoning yourself, the part that has never stopped loving you, even when you stopped listening. One reason people struggle to trust themselves is because they think their inner voice should always be certain. They think wisdom always feels confident, but real wisdom is often quiet, gentle, subtle. It does not always come with complete answers. Sometimes it only offers a small feeling, a small knowing, a small nudge, a small sense that something is not aligned. And that is enough, because your inner voice does not need to know the entire path. It only needs to know the next step. But when you repeatedly ignore those small nudges, life becomes heavier, not because life is punishing you, but because your soul is trying to guide you. Imagine driving a car while ignoring every warning light on the dashboard. The lights are not there to punish you. They are there to help you. They are there to prevent greater damage. Your emotions work the same way. Your exhaustion is a signal. Your resentment is a signal. Your anxiety is a signal. Your sadness is a signal. Your lack of peace is a signal. Your feeling of being emotionally drained is a signal. These feelings are not your enemies. They are messengers. And when you attack the messenger instead of listening to the message, suffering continues. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to observe without judgment, to sit with what arises, to look honestly, to remain present, not to immediately fix, not to immediately escape, not to immediately explain away what we feel. Just observe, just notice, just listen, and something extraordinary begins to happen when you practice this. You start recognizing patterns. You start seeing where your energy disappears. You start noticing who leaves you feeling peaceful and who leaves you feeling exhausted. You start noticing when you are acting from love and when you are acting from fear. You start noticing how often you betray yourself just to keep things comfortable. And awareness creates choice. Before awareness, everything is automatic. You react without thinking. You say yes without thinking. You apologize without thinking. You sacrifice without thinking. You abandon yourself without thinking. But awareness interrupts the pattern. Awareness creates a pause. And inside that pause, freedom becomes possible. Inside that pause, you can choose differently. You can choose honesty instead of performance. You can choose boundaries instead of resentment. You can choose rest instead of exhaustion. You can choose self-respect instead of self-betrayal. You can choose yourself. But before you can trust yourself again, you must forgive yourself. Forgive yourself for all the times you ignored your needs. Forgive yourself for the years you spent doubting your own wisdom. Forgive yourself for staying too long. Forgive yourself for giving too much. Forgive yourself for not knowing what you know now, because self-judgment only creates more distance from yourself. Compassion brings you back. The path home is not through criticism. The path home is through understanding. You were doing the best you could with the awareness you had. You were surviving. You were adapting. You were trying to be loved. You were trying to belong. Now you are learning something different. Now you are learning how to belong to yourself. And that changes everything. Because when you trust yourself, you stop looking outside for constant permission. You stop needing everyone to agree. You stop asking people to tell you what your heart already knows. You stop abandoning your truth every time someone disapproves. You stop treating your intuition like an enemy. You begin treating it like a guide that has been with you all along, a guide that has watched every chapter of your life, a guide that knows your wounds, knows your dreams, knows your limits, knows your strengths, knows your pain, knows your deepest truth. And the beautiful thing is this: your inner voice never truly disappeared. It was never gone. It was only buried beneath noise, beneath fear, beneath guilt, beneath years of choosing everyone else first. But it is still there, waiting, patiently, quietly, like a light hidden beneath layers of dust. And every time you choose honesty over fear, that light grows brighter. Every time you honor your needs, that light grows brighter. Every time you listen to yourself, instead of abandoning yourself, that light grows brighter, until one day you realize something incredible. The guidance you were searching for everywhere else was already inside you. The wisdom you kept looking for in other people was already inside you. The peace you kept chasing outside yourself was already inside you, waiting for you to trust it, waiting for you to hear it, waiting for you to come home. And perhaps the greatest act of self-love is this: to finally believe that your own soul deserves to be heard, to finally trust the quiet wisdom within you, to finally stop betraying yourself every time your truth becomes inconvenient. Because the moment you begin trusting your inner voice again, you stop living according to everyone else's expectations, and you begin living according to something far more powerful, your own awakened heart. You are not protecting peace. You are protecting other people's comfort. Many people spend their entire lives believing they are protecting peace. They tell themselves they are being mature. They tell themselves they are being understanding. They tell themselves they are avoiding unnecessary conflict. They tell themselves they are choosing harmony. But if they look deeply enough, they discover something painful. They are not protecting peace. They are protecting other people's comfort. And there is a very important difference between the two. Real peace feels light. Real peace feels honest. Real peace allows you to breathe freely. Real peace does not require you to hide your feelings. Real peace does not force you to betray yourself. Real peace does not ask you to shrink. But comfort is different. Comfort often depends on keeping things exactly as they are. Comfort avoids difficult conversations. Comfort avoids uncomfortable truths. Comfort keeps unhealthy patterns alive because change feels inconvenient. And many people spend years sacrificing their own peace just to maintain someone else's comfort. Maybe you know this feeling. Someone says something that hurts you, but instead of speaking honestly, you stay quiet. Not because you agree, not because it didn't hurt, but because you don't want tension, you don't want conflict, you don't want them to become upset, you don't want them to think badly of you. So you swallow your feelings again and again and again. At first it seems harmless, but every time you silence yourself, something inside you becomes heavier. Every time you suppress your truth, your spirit becomes more tired. Every time you choose comfort over honesty, you move a little farther away from yourself. This is why so many people feel exhausted even when they appear calm. Their mouths are silent, but their hearts are screaming. Their faces are smiling, but their souls are carrying years of unspoken pain. Their lives look peaceful from the outside, but inside there is a storm, because unspoken truth does not disappear. It stays, it accumulates, it grows, it becomes resentment, it becomes frustration, it becomes sadness, it becomes emotional exhaustion, it becomes the feeling of being invisible, and eventually it becomes suffering. Buddhism teaches that suffering often comes from resistance, and one of the greatest forms of resistance is resisting your own truth. When you constantly push down what you feel, you create an inner conflict. One part of you wants honesty, another part wants approval, one part wants freedom, another part wants safety, one part wants to speak, another part is terrified of the consequences, and because of this inner battle, you never feel fully at peace. You feel divided. You feel disconnected. You feel trapped between who you are and who you think you must be. The truth is that many people have spent so much time managing other people's emotions that they have forgotten how to care for their own. They know when everyone else is upset. They know when everyone else is uncomfortable. They know when everyone else needs support. But they rarely ask themselves a simple question. What about me? What about my feelings? What about my exhaustion? What about my boundaries? What about my peace? What about my needs? What about the part of me that keeps sacrificing itself to keep everyone else comfortable? That part matters too. That part deserves attention too. That part deserves compassion too. One reason people fall into this pattern is because they fear being seen as difficult. They fear being seen as selfish. They fear being seen as negative. They fear being misunderstood. So they become experts at emotional self-sacrifice. They become experts at pretending, experts at smiling when they are hurting, experts at saying I'm fine when they are not fine, experts at carrying burdens nobody even knows they are carrying. But eventually the cost becomes too high, because every act of self-silencing sends a message to your subconscious mind. It says, my feelings are less important, my needs can wait, my truth is dangerous, my comfort doesn't matter, my peace is less valuable than theirs. And after years of hearing this message, your mind starts believing it. You begin treating yourself as if you are the least important person in your own life. You become the caretaker of everyone else, while abandoning yourself. You become available to everyone except your own soul. And this is why so many people feel empty despite doing everything for everyone. Because no amount of giving can fill the emptiness created by self-abandonment. No amount of approval can replace self-respect. No amount of external harmony can replace inner honesty. The Buddha never taught people to suppress themselves. He taught awareness. He taught truth. He taught seeing clearly. He taught freedom from illusion. And one of the greatest illusions is believing that keeping everyone comfortable will bring you peace. It won't, because peace built on self-betrayal is not peace. It is emotional imprisonment. Real peace requires truth. Real peace requires courage. Real peace requires authenticity. Sometimes peace requires saying no. Sometimes peace requires disappointing someone. Sometimes peace requires stepping away. Sometimes peace requires speaking a truth that others do not want to hear. Sometimes peace requires allowing others to experience their own discomfort rather than rescuing them from it. And this can feel frightening, especially if you have spent your life being the peacemaker, the helper, the mediator, the one who smooths everything over, the one who keeps everyone happy. Because when you begin changing, people may react. Some may not understand. Some may become uncomfortable. Some may accuse you of changing. But of course you are changing. You are waking up. You are beginning to realize that your purpose is not to manage everyone else's emotions. Your purpose is not to carry everyone's burdens. Your purpose is not to spend your life preventing discomfort. Your purpose is to live truthfully. Your purpose is to live consciously. Your purpose is to live awake. Many people confuse peace with the absence of conflict, but peace is much deeper than that. Peace is the absence of inner war. Peace is when your actions align with your truth. Peace is when your words align with your heart. Peace is when you stop fighting yourself. Peace is when you stop forcing yourself to be someone you are not. Peace is when you stop betraying your needs for acceptance. Peace is when you stop abandoning yourself to maintain appearances. That is real peace. And the journey toward that peace often begins with a single act of courage. One honest conversation, one healthy boundary, one truthful no, one moment where you choose self-respect over approval, one moment where you stop apologizing for having needs, one moment where you stop carrying responsibility for everyone else's emotions, one moment where you choose authenticity over performance. That single moment may seem small, but it changes everything, because every time you honor your truth, you strengthen your relationship with yourself. Every time you honor your feelings, you rebuild trust with yourself. Every time you choose honesty over comfort, you become a little more free. And freedom is what your soul has been longing for all along. Not the freedom to control others, not the freedom to avoid every challenge, but the freedom to be yourself, the freedom to speak honestly, the freedom to rest without guilt, the freedom to have boundaries, the freedom to choose peace without apologizing for it, the freedom to stop carrying emotional responsibilities that were never yours, the freedom to stop shrinking, the freedom to stop pretending, the freedom to stop living as a guardian of everyone else's comfort while neglecting your own inner world. Because your peace matters, your truth matters, your feelings matter, your needs matter, your voice matters. And the moment you finally understand this, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop protecting comfort. You start protecting your soul. You stop maintaining appearances. You start living authentically. You stop asking, how can I keep everyone comfortable? And you begin asking a much wiser question. How can I live in alignment with my deepest truth? That question changes everything, because the answer is not found in pleasing everyone. The answer is found in finally choosing not to abandon yourself anymore. And that is where true peace begins. The version of you that pleases everyone is afraid to die. One of the deepest truths you will ever discover on the path of awakening is this. The person who keeps abandoning themselves is not weak. They are scared. Not scared of failure, not scared of hard work, not even scared of pain. They are scared of losing the version of themselves that helped them survive. Because long before you learned about boundaries, self-respect, or inner peace, you created a version of yourself designed to keep you safe. A version that learned how to please, a version that learned how to adapt, a version that learned how to become whatever other people needed, a version that learned how to avoid rejection, a version that learned how to earn love. And for many years that version protected you. It helped you fit in. It helped you avoid conflict. It helped you stay connected. It helped you feel accepted. It helped you survive difficult situations. So before we go any further, understand this. Do not hate that version of yourself. Do not judge it. Do not call it weak. Do not call it foolish. That version was trying to protect you with the knowledge it had at the time. It was doing its best. The problem is that what helps you survive one season of life can become a prison in another. And eventually there comes a moment when the old version of you can no longer take you where your soul wants to go. The people-pleasing version, the approval-seeking version, the self-sacrificing version, the version that constantly says yes, the version that never wants anyone upset, the version that keeps shrinking itself, the version that keeps abandoning its own needs. That version eventually becomes too small for the life you are meant to live. But here is the challenge. The old self does not disappear quietly. It fights for survival, because every identity wants to survive, even the identities that cause suffering. This is why change feels so uncomfortable. When you start setting boundaries, the old version panics. When you start saying no, the old version panics. When you stop explaining yourself to everyone, the old version panics. When you choose peace over approval, the old version panics. And suddenly you hear all those familiar thoughts. What if they get upset? What if they leave? What if they stop liking me? What if people think I have changed? What if I disappoint someone? What if I lose the connection? But notice something important. These fears are not really about the present moment. They are echoes from the past. They are old survival strategies trying to keep control. They are the voice of an identity that believes your safety depends on other people's approval. They are the voice of a version of you that learned love must be earned. And because that version helped you survive for so long, letting it go can feel terrifying. In many ways, awakening feels like a death, not a physical death, an identity death. The death of the person you had to become, the death of the masks you wore, the death of the patterns that once protected you, the death of the endless need for validation, the death of the constant fear of disappointing others, the death of the belief that your worth comes from what you do for people. And whenever something dies, even something unhealthy, there is grief. Many people do not talk about this part of healing. They talk about growth. They talk about freedom. They talk about transformation. But they rarely talk about grief. The grief of becoming someone new. The grief of leaving old patterns behind. The grief of realizing how much of your life was spent performing. The grief of seeing how often you abandoned yourself. The grief of understanding how much energy was spent trying to earn what should have been freely given. Love, acceptance, belonging. And during this stage, something strange happens. You may start feeling lonely, not because you are doing something wrong, but because the old version of you is slowly disappearing. The version that everyone knew, the version that everyone expected, the version that everyone depended on, the version that never challenged anything, the version that never asked for much, the version that always made life easy for everyone else. As that version begins to fade, some people may become uncomfortable, not because you are becoming worse, but because you are becoming real. People who benefited from your lack of boundaries may not celebrate your growth. People who enjoyed unlimited access to your energy may not like your limits. People who were comfortable with your self-sacrifice may not understand your self-respect. And this is where many people turn back, not because they want to, but because the discomfort feels overwhelming. They return to old habits, old roles, old masks, old patterns, because familiar suffering often feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. The Buddha understood this deeply. He taught that attachment creates suffering, and one of the strongest attachments we carry is attachment to who we think we are. We become attached to identities, attached to roles, attached to stories, attached to versions of ourselves that no longer serve us, and yet we cling to them because they feel familiar, because they feel safe, because we do not know who we will be without them. But growth requires letting go. You cannot become who you are meant to be while holding tightly to who you had to be. You cannot step into freedom while carrying an identity built entirely on fear. You cannot discover your authentic self while protecting every mask you have ever worn. Eventually, something must be released. Something must end. Something must be surrendered. And this surrender is not weakness. It is courage. It takes courage to stop performing. It takes courage to stop pretending. It takes courage to disappoint people. It takes courage to stop explaining every decision. It takes courage to let people misunderstand you. It takes courage to choose yourself after a lifetime of choosing everyone else. But this courage is where transformation begins, because on the other side of the old identity is something beautiful. The real you, not the version shaped by fear, not the version built around approval, not the version created to avoid rejection, but the real you, the one who does not need constant validation, the one who can say no without guilt, the one who can love without losing themselves, the one who can be compassionate without becoming exhausted, the one who can be kind without becoming available to everyone, the one who can speak honestly without apologizing for existing, the one who can walk away from what harms their peace, the one who no longer needs to earn their worth. And perhaps this is the most beautiful realization of all. You were never meant to spend your life performing for acceptance. You were never meant to become a character in other people's stories. You were never meant to shrink yourself into a shape that made everyone comfortable. You were meant to awaken. You were meant to remember who you were beneath all the conditioning, beneath all the fear, beneath all the expectations, beneath all the masks. That person is still there, waiting, patiently, quietly, not demanding attention, not forcing anything, simply waiting for you to stop running, waiting for you to stop performing, waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself, waiting for you to stop asking everyone else who you should be. And the moment you finally stop protecting the false self, something extraordinary happens. The real self begins to emerge, slowly, gently, naturally, like the sun rising after a long night. You begin speaking more honestly. You begin trusting yourself more deeply. You begin needing less approval. You begin carrying less guilt. You begin feeling more peaceful. You begin breathing more freely. You begin living more authentically. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you experience something that people spend decades searching for. Not approval, not praise, not validation, but inner freedom. The freedom that comes when you no longer need to be who everyone expects. The freedom that comes when you stop protecting a version of yourself built from fear. The freedom that comes when you finally allow the people-pleasing self to rest, because it has carried you long enough. It has worked hard enough. It has suffered enough. Now it is time for something new. Now it is time for the real you to step forward. And that is where true transformation begins. Not when everyone approves of your growth, but when you become willing to let the old version of yourself die, so the authentic version can finally live. That is not loss. That is awakening. That is liberation. That is the beginning of becoming whole again. When you ignore your value, you teach others to ignore it too. One of the hardest truths to accept is this: people do not always learn how valuable you are from your words. They learn from what you repeatedly allow. They learn from the way you treat yourself. They learn from the standards you set. They learn from the boundaries you keep. They learn from what you tolerate. They learn from what you continue accepting. And when you constantly ignore your own value, the world slowly begins to do the same. Not because you deserve it, not because people are always cruel, but because human beings naturally adjust to what is repeatedly available. If you keep giving without limits, people begin expecting unlimited access. If you keep forgiving without change, people begin expecting endless forgiveness. If you keep sacrificing your needs, people begin assuming your needs are not important. If you keep abandoning yourself, people eventually stop noticing that you are disappearing. This is one of the most painful realities of self-abandonment. The more you teach people that your peace is negotiable, the more they begin treating it as negotiable. The more you teach people that your time is unlimited, the more they begin treating it as unlimited. The more you teach people that your energy can always be taken, the more they begin taking it. And after years of this pattern, something heartbreaking happens. You begin feeling invisible. You begin feeling unappreciated. You begin feeling used. You begin wondering why nobody values you the way you value them. Why nobody protects your heart the way you protect theirs. Why nobody checks on you the way you check on them. Why nobody gives as much as you give. Why nobody notices how tired you are. But often the deeper question is this: have you been showing people how to value you, or have you been teaching them that your value comes from how much you sacrifice? Because there is a difference, a very important difference. Many people unknowingly build relationships around self-neglect. They become loved for what they provide rather than who they are. Loved for their availability, loved for their patience, loved for their flexibility, loved for their willingness to tolerate more than they should, loved for never asking for much, loved for making life easy for everyone else. But this kind of love creates an imbalance, because eventually people become attached to your giving, not your being. They become attached to your availability, not your authenticity. They become attached to the role you play, not the person you are. And when you finally start changing, the reaction can be surprising. The moment you set a boundary, some people become uncomfortable. The moment you say no, some people become confused. The moment you stop over-explaining, some people become irritated. The moment you stop sacrificing your peace, some people accuse you of changing. But what they are actually noticing is this: you have stopped teaching them that your needs come last. You have stopped teaching them that your energy is free. You have stopped teaching them that your life exists only to support theirs, and suddenly the relationship has to adjust. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering, but one attachment many people never notice is the attachment to being accepted at any cost, the attachment to being liked, the attachment to being needed, the attachment to being the person who never causes discomfort. This attachment often causes people to tolerate things they should never tolerate: disrespect, manipulation, neglect, one-sided effort, emotional exhaustion, broken boundaries, and because they fear losing connection, they continue accepting it. They continue shrinking. They continue compromising. They continue giving pieces of themselves away, until one day they look in the mirror and barely recognize who they have become. Because every time you ignore your own value, you move farther away from yourself. Every time you tolerate what hurts your spirit, you weaken your relationship with yourself. Every time you stay silent about what matters, you send a message to your subconscious mind. The message says, "My needs are not important. My feelings do not matter. My peace can wait. My boundaries are optional. My worth depends on keeping people happy." And eventually your mind starts believing it. This is why healing is not only about changing how other people treat you, it is about changing how you treat yourself. Because the relationship you have with yourself becomes the blueprint for every other relationship in your life. If you disrespect yourself, others will often follow that example. If you ignore your own limits, others will often ignore them too. If you constantly abandon your needs, others may assume your needs do not exist. But when you begin valuing yourself differently, something powerful happens. Your energy changes, your decisions change, your standards change, your relationships change, not because you become arrogant, not because you become selfish, but because you become aware. You begin recognizing that your life is valuable, your time is valuable, your energy is valuable, your peace is valuable, your attention is valuable, your presence is valuable. And once you truly understand this, you stop handing these things away carelessly. You stop giving access to people who only create chaos. You stop chasing people who repeatedly ignore your worth. You stop begging people to see what they refuse to see. You stop proving your value to those determined to overlook it. Instead, you begin standing quietly in your own truth. And there is something incredibly powerful about a person who knows their worth without needing to announce it. A person who no longer needs constant validation. A person who no longer explains every boundary. A person who no longer argues for their right to have peace. A person who no longer apologizes for protecting their energy. That kind of person becomes difficult to manipulate, because manipulation often depends on self-doubt. It depends on guilt. It depends on insecurity. It depends on the fear of losing approval. But when you know your value, those fears begin losing their power. You stop chasing crumbs because you remember you deserve a full meal. You stop settling for occasional respect because you understand respect should not be conditional. You stop accepting relationships built entirely on your sacrifice. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop confusing dependency with connection. You stop confusing being used with being valued. And this changes everything, because many people spend years trying to convince others to value them. But real transformation happens when you begin valuing yourself first, not through ego, not through superiority, not through pride, but through awareness. The awareness that your life is sacred, the awareness that your energy is limited, the awareness that your heart deserves protection too, the awareness that you matter. This simple truth can completely transform the way you move through the world. When you know your value, you no longer feel the need to over-explain. When you know your value, you no longer feel the need to over-prove. When you know your value, you no longer feel the need to earn every ounce of love. When you know your value, you stop chasing what cannot recognize it. The Buddha often pointed people back to awareness, because awareness changes everything. The moment you become aware of your value, you begin noticing where you have been giving it away. You begin noticing the relationships that drain you. You begin noticing the conversations that shrink you. You begin noticing the environments that make you feel small. You begin noticing the people who only appreciate you when you are useful. And awareness creates choice. For the first time, you can choose differently. You can choose self-respect over approval. You can choose peace over people-pleasing. You can choose truth over performance. You can choose growth over comfort. You can choose yourself, not because you are more important than others, but because you are not less important than others. That is the lesson. That is the awakening. You are not less important. Your peace is not less important. Your needs are not less important. Your dreams are not less important. Your healing is not less important. Your life is not less important. And the moment you truly understand this, the entire way you relate to the world begins to change. You stop begging for value. You start living from value. You stop asking people to choose you. You start choosing yourself. You stop trying to convince everyone of your worth. You start remembering it. And when that happens, something beautiful unfolds. People who genuinely respect you become clearer. Relationships become healthier. Boundaries become easier. Peace becomes deeper. And for the first time in a very long time, you stop abandoning yourself in order to belong, because you finally realize something your soul has been trying to tell you all along. The more you honor your value, the less you need the world to validate it. And that is where true freedom begins. That is where self-respect begins. That is where healing begins. And that is where your real life finally starts. The compassion you give everyone else must finally return to you. There is a question that very few people ever stop to ask themselves. A question so simple, yet so powerful, that it can change the direction of an entire life. The question is this: why is it easier for you to be kind to everyone else than it is to be kind to yourself? Think about it honestly. When a friend makes a mistake, you understand. When someone you love is struggling, you encourage them. When another person is hurting, you listen. When someone feels lost, you comfort them. When someone is exhausted, you tell them to rest. When someone feels broken, you remind them of their worth. When someone is carrying pain, you tell them to be patient with themselves. You know exactly how to offer compassion. You know exactly how to offer understanding. You know exactly how to offer forgiveness. You know exactly how to offer grace. But the moment the suffering belongs to you, everything changes. Suddenly the voice becomes harsher, less patient, less understanding, less forgiving. You make a mistake and attack yourself. You feel tired and call yourself weak. You need rest and call yourself lazy. You struggle and tell yourself you should be stronger. You feel pain and tell yourself to get over it. You fail and convince yourself you are not enough. You carry wounds and then judge yourself for bleeding. And without realizing it, you become the one person in your life who receives the least compassion from you. This is one of the deepest forms of self-abandonment, not because you hate yourself, but because somewhere along the way you learned that everyone deserves kindness except you. You learned that everyone deserves patience except you. You learned that everyone deserves understanding except you. You learned that your value depends on being strong, useful, productive, and available. And whenever you fall short of those expectations, you punish yourself. Many people live their entire lives this way. They become a safe place for everyone else, but they never become a safe place for themselves. They become a source of comfort for everyone else, but they never learn how to comfort their own heart. They become a source of healing for everyone else, but they never allow themselves to heal. And after years of living this way, something begins to happen. The soul becomes tired, not because life is hard, but because it has been carrying life without tenderness. Because every human being needs compassion, not occasionally, not once in a while, every day. Compassion is not a luxury. It is emotional nourishment. It is to the soul what water is to a flower. Without it, something begins to dry up inside. And this is why so many people feel exhausted, even when they are doing all the right things. Because they are trying to heal through effort while starving themselves of compassion. They are trying to become better through criticism. They are trying to grow through self-judgment. They are trying to find peace through inner warfare. But peace never grows in an environment of self-attack. A flower cannot bloom while being crushed. A heart cannot heal while being constantly condemned. A soul cannot awaken while being treated like an enemy. The Buddha taught compassion, not because life is easy, but because life is difficult. Compassion exists precisely because suffering exists. And if compassion is necessary for others, it is necessary for you too. You are not separate from humanity. You are not separate from suffering. You are not separate from the need for understanding. You deserve the same kindness you offer everyone else. You deserve the same patience. You deserve the same forgiveness. You deserve the same softness. You deserve the same grace. And perhaps this is difficult for you to believe, because many people secretly fear self-compassion. They worry it will make them weak. They worry it will make them lazy. They worry it will remove their ambition. They worry it will make them careless. But true compassion does not make people weak. It makes them whole. There is a difference. Self-pity says, I am helpless. Self-compassion says, I am hurting, and I deserve kindness. Self-pity keeps people stuck. Self-compassion helps people heal. Self-pity avoids responsibility. Self-compassion supports responsibility with understanding. Self-pity focuses only on suffering. Self-compassion creates the strength to move through suffering. This is why compassion is one of the most powerful forms of wisdom, because it allows healing without self-destruction. Many people believe growth requires punishment. They believe they must constantly criticize themselves to improve. They believe harshness creates discipline. But look closely at your own life. Has self-criticism truly brought you peace? Has attacking yourself healed your wounds? Has judging yourself made you feel whole? Or has it simply created more suffering? The truth is that most people are already carrying enough pain. They do not need another enemy. They need a friend. And that friend must eventually become themselves. Imagine speaking to yourself the way you speak to someone you deeply love. Imagine responding to your mistakes with understanding instead of shame. Imagine responding to your exhaustion with care instead of criticism. Imagine responding to your struggles with patience instead of judgment. Imagine becoming a place of refuge for your own heart. For many people, this feels almost impossible because they have spent years believing they must earn compassion, earn rest, earn forgiveness, earn worthiness. But compassion is not something you earn. Compassion is something you practice. And the more you practice it, the more your relationship with yourself begins to change. You stop seeing yourself as a problem to fix. You start seeing yourself as a human being to understand. You stop fighting every uncomfortable emotion. You start listening to it. You stop treating your pain as weakness. You start treating it as information. You stop demanding perfection. You start accepting growth. You stop abandoning yourself Every time life becomes difficult, you start standing beside yourself. This is where healing begins. Not when everything becomes perfect, not when all your wounds disappear, not when life finally becomes easy. Healing begins the moment you stop leaving yourself alone in your suffering. The moment you sit beside your own pain instead of running from it. The moment you tell yourself, I know this hurts. I know this is hard. I know you are tired. I know you are trying. I know you are carrying more than most people can see. And instead of attacking yourself, you stay. You stay present. You stay gentle. You stay patient. You stay compassionate. Because this is what true healing requires. Presence, not perfection. Awareness, not self-punishment. Love, not criticism. Many people spend years searching for someone who will finally understand them, someone who will finally see them, someone who will finally offer unconditional kindness, someone who will finally make them feel safe. But one of the greatest awakenings on the Buddhist path is realizing this. You must become that person for yourself. You must become the safe place. You must become the understanding presence. You must become the compassionate voice. You must become the friend your heart has been waiting for. Because no matter who enters your life, the one person who remains with you every day is you. And if your relationship with yourself is built on criticism, no amount of external love will feel like enough. But if your relationship with yourself is built on compassion, everything changes. You become calmer, more grounded, more resilient, more patient, more peaceful. Not because life becomes easier, but because you stop fighting yourself. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of all. Most of your suffering does not come only from what happened to you. Much of it comes from how you continue treating yourself afterward. The wound hurts, but self-judgment often hurts longer. The mistake hurts, but shame often hurts longer. The disappointment hurts, but self-criticism often hurts longer. This is why compassion is so powerful. It ends the second wound. It ends the wound created by your reaction to your pain. It ends the habit of attacking yourself for being human. And in that space, something beautiful begins to grow. Not perfection, not superiority, not endless happiness, something much more valuable. Inner peace, the peace that comes when you no longer treat yourself like an enemy, the peace that comes when your heart finally feels safe with you, the peace that comes when compassion, after years of flowing outward, finally begins flowing inward. And perhaps that is the moment everything changes, the moment you stop asking, who will save me? And begin asking, how can I be more compassionate toward myself today? That question alone can begin an entirely new life. A life where you no longer abandon yourself when you suffer. A life where you no longer punish yourself for being imperfect. A life where you finally understand that the compassion you have spent years giving to everyone else was never meant to exclude you. It was meant for you too. And when that compassion finally returns home, your healing truly begins. You cannot find yourself while living as a response to everyone else. One of the saddest things that can happen in a person's life is not losing their job. It is not losing money. It is not even losing a relationship. It is losing themselves. And the most dangerous part is that this loss usually happens so slowly that they do not notice it. There is no dramatic moment, no warning alarm, no single event. It happens little by little, one compromise at a time, one sacrifice at a time, one ignored feeling at a time, one people-pleasing decision at a time, until one day they wake up and realize something feels missing, something feels empty, something feels disconnected, and they cannot explain why. From the outside, life may look normal. They are working, talking, smiling, helping, giving, showing up, doing everything they are supposed to do. Yet deep inside there is a quiet feeling that says, I don't know who I am anymore. This feeling is becoming more common in the modern world, not because people are weak, but because so many people are living as a response to everyone else. They are reacting instead of living, responding instead of choosing, performing instead of being. Their entire life becomes a reaction to what other people want. Someone needs help, they immediately help. Someone sends a message, they immediately respond. Someone becomes upset, they immediately try to fix it. Someone disapproves, they immediately begin doubting themselves. Someone praises them, they immediately feel worthy again, and before long, their emotional state is controlled by everything happening outside of them. They are no longer living from their center. They are living from reaction, and a life built on reaction slowly pulls you away from yourself, because every moment spent reacting to everyone else's expectations is a moment not spent listening to your own soul. The Buddha taught that awareness is the path to freedom, but awareness becomes difficult when your attention is constantly pulled outward, when your focus is always on other people's opinions, other people's emotions, other people's demands, other people's expectations, other people's approval. You stop hearing your own inner world. You stop hearing your own needs. You stop hearing your own truth. You stop hearing your own wisdom. Eventually, you become so busy responding to life that you forget how to experience life. You become so focused on pleasing others that you forget what brings you peace. You become so focused on fitting in that you forget what feels authentic. You become so focused on being accepted that you forget who you actually are. And this creates a strange kind of suffering, because human beings are not meant to live disconnected from themselves. The soul naturally longs for authenticity. It naturally longs for truth. It naturally longs for alignment. And when those things are missing, no amount of external success feels complete. This is why some people have good jobs but feel empty. This is why some people have relationships but still feel lonely. This is why some people receive praise but still feel unseen. Because the deepest human need is not approval. It is connection. Connection with yourself. Connection with your truth. Connection with your authentic nature. Many people spend years searching for themselves in relationships, searching for themselves in achievements, searching for themselves in status, searching for themselves in the opinions of others. But you cannot find yourself in places where you have abandoned yourself. You cannot discover who you are while constantly becoming what everyone else wants you to be. You cannot hear your inner voice while living inside other people's expectations. And this is why solitude is so powerful. Not loneliness, not isolation, solitude. The ability to sit with yourself, the ability to listen, the ability to observe your own mind, the ability to become familiar with your own heart again. Many people fear solitude because it removes distractions. Without distractions, they must finally face themselves. Without distractions, they hear the feelings they have been avoiding. Without distractions, they notice the exhaustion, the sadness, the confusion, the longing, the unhealed wounds. But this is also where healing begins, because what is faced can be healed. What is acknowledged can be understood. What is understood can be transformed. Buddhist wisdom teaches us to return to the present moment, not because the present moment is always comfortable, but because the present moment is where truth lives. When you become present, you start noticing things. You notice how often you say yes when you mean no. You notice how often you seek approval. You notice how often you betray your own needs. You notice how much energy goes into maintaining an image. You notice how much of your life has been built around avoiding discomfort. And this awareness is not meant to make you feel guilty. It is meant to set you free, because once you see the pattern, you are no longer trapped inside it. You begin asking different questions. Not, what do they want from me? But, what do I actually feel? Not, how do I make everyone happy? But, what would bring me peace? Not, how do I avoid disappointing others? But, why am I so afraid of disappointing others? These questions lead you inward, and every journey inward brings you closer to yourself. Many people believe finding themselves requires some dramatic transformation. A new city, a new relationship, a new job, a new identity. But often finding yourself is much simpler. It begins with honesty. Honesty about what you feel. Honesty about what you want. Honesty about what hurts. Honesty about what no longer aligns with your spirit. Honesty about where you have been pretending. Honesty about where you have been settling. Honesty about where you have been abandoning yourself. Because every act of honesty is an act of return. Every act of awareness is a step home. Every moment of authenticity rebuilds the connection between you and your true nature. Slowly, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop reacting as much. You become more intentional. You pause before answering. You pause before agreeing. You pause before sacrificing your peace. You pause before abandoning yourself. And inside that pause, a new life begins. A life guided by awareness rather than fear. A life guided by truth rather than approval. A life guided by wisdom rather than habit. The more connected you become to yourself, the less dependent you become on external validation. Not because you stop caring about people, but because your identity is no longer built on their opinions. You stop chasing every opportunity to prove your worth. You stop explaining yourself to everyone. You stop trying to earn love through exhaustion. You stop seeking permission to exist. You stop apologizing for having needs. And gradually, you begin living from your center. This is what inner freedom feels like. It feels calm, grounded, stable, not because life becomes perfect, but because your sense of self is no longer controlled by everything happening around you. You become like a tree with deep roots. The wind still blows, the storms still come, people still have opinions, challenges still appear, but you remain rooted. You remain connected to yourself, and that connection changes everything. Because when you know who you are, you no longer need everyone else to tell you. When you trust yourself, you no longer need constant approval. When you value yourself, you no longer need to chase validation. When you are connected to your truth, you no longer need to perform. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. You cannot find yourself while constantly running away from yourself. You cannot discover your truth while living entirely for other people. You cannot hear your soul while drowning in expectations. Eventually, you must return. Return to your breath. Return to your awareness. Return to your heart. Return to the quiet place within you that has been patiently waiting all along. The place beneath the roles, beneath the expectations, beneath the fear, beneath the performance, the place where the real you still exists, unchanged, whole, present, waiting. And when you finally reconnect with that place, something extraordinary happens. You stop searching for yourself because you realize you were never truly lost. You were simply distracted. Distracted by approval, distracted by expectations, distracted by the endless effort to become what everyone else wanted. And now, for the first time in a very long time, you are coming home, not to a place, but to yourself. And that is one of the most beautiful journeys a human being can ever take. Because the moment you stop living as a response to everyone else is the moment you finally begin living as yourself. And that is where true freedom begins. That is where true peace begins. That is where your real life begins. Perhaps the greatest tragedy in life is not that people leave you, it is that you leave yourself while trying to keep everyone else. For years, you may have believed that your value came from how much you could give, how much you could sacrifice, how much you could carry, how much you could tolerate, how much of yourself you could give away without breaking. But now you know the truth. You were never meant to disappear so others could feel comfortable. You were never meant to spend your life earning love through exhaustion. You were never meant to abandon your own heart in order to belong. The Buddha taught that suffering begins when we cling to illusions, and one of the greatest illusions is believing that everyone else's needs matter more than your own. Because the moment you start treating yourself as unimportant, the world often follows your example. But the moment you remember your worth, everything begins to change. Your choices change, your boundaries change, your relationships change, your peace changes. Most importantly, your relationship with yourself changes. So if there is one thing to remember from this entire message, let it be this: you can be kind without sacrificing yourself. You can love without losing yourself. You can care without carrying everyone. You can give without becoming empty. And you can choose yourself without becoming selfish. The people who truly belong in your life will never require your self-destruction to keep them comfortable. The right people will respect your boundaries. The right people will honor your growth. The right people will celebrate the version of you that is finally learning to live in peace. And if some people become uncomfortable when you stop abandoning yourself, Let them. Not everyone is meant to grow with you. Not everyone is meant to understand your awakening. Your responsibility is not to make everyone comfortable. Your responsibility is to stop betraying your own soul. So from this moment forward, make yourself a quiet promise, a promise that no one else needs to hear, a promise between you and your heart. I will stop apologizing for having needs. I will stop sacrificing my peace for approval. I will stop abandoning myself to keep others close. I will listen to my inner voice. I will honor my worth. I will choose truth over performance. I will choose awareness over fear. I will choose myself too. Because the day you stop leaving yourself behind is the day your healing truly begins. And perhaps that day is today. If this message spoke to something deep inside you, take a moment right now and write these words in the comments. I choose myself too, not from ego, not from selfishness, but from awareness, from self-respect, from a commitment to stop abandoning yourself for everyone else. And if you are walking this path of inner peace, self-discovery, and awakening, be sure to subscribe to Zen Path of Realization and join a community of people who are learning to live with more awareness, more wisdom, and more inner freedom. Remember, you do not need to become someone else to find peace. You only need to stop abandoning who you truly are. Until our next journey together, take care of your mind, protect your peace, and keep walking the path of realization. Because the person you have been searching for all along may simply be the real you.